Welcome to Monk's Temple. Have you ever planted a seed? Not just in the earth, but in the quiet soil of your own expectations. You place it there with such hope, a dream for a relationship, a vision for a career, a plan for a perfect day. You water it with your effort, you shield it with your worry, you wait for the exact, predictable shape of the blossom you have already pictured in your mind. And then life, with its own weather, intervenes. The blossom that emerges is different. Perhaps it's smaller, or a color you never expected, or it grows in a direction that seems entirely wrong. That quiet ache of disappointment, it's a universal whisper. The feeling that reality has misunderstood your carefully drawn instructions. What if reality isn't misunderstanding? What if it is reading from a deeper blueprint, one your soul agreed to but your conscious mind has forgotten? This is the gentle, profound inquiry at the heart of ancient wisdom. It is not a demand for blind optimism, but an invitation to a different kind of sight. The teachings that flowed from the Buddha are not a promise of a smooth path, but a map for navigating the actual, rugged terrain of a human life. They suggest that every twist, every rock underfoot, even the sudden drops into shadow, are part of the landscape's sacred intention. Your journey is not a mistake. It is a conversation. Let's begin with a story, a modern parable. There was a master calligrapher known for his perfect, disciplined strokes. His ink was blackest black, his paper pure white. One afternoon, as he was finishing a commissioned scroll of great importance, a young apprentice, trembling with fear, tripped and spilled a pot of crimson ink across the bottom third of the masterpiece. The perfect characters were drowned in a chaotic, spreading bloom of red. The apprentice froze, awaiting furious dismissal. The master said nothing. He looked at the ruin for a long, still moment. Then, he took a new brush, dipped it in the crimson pool, and began to paint. From the formless spill, he brought forth a winding branch of plum blossoms, their flowers a delicate pink he mixed from the red and the white of the paper. The stark black characters now rose above this unexpected, vibrant scene of wild beauty. The scroll became his most famous work, not in spite of the accident, but because of it. It was no longer just a statement of discipline, it was a dialogue between control and chaos, between intention and grace. The catastrophe was the necessary condition for a beauty he could never have planned. The apprentice's shame, the master's initial shock, we know these feelings. We call them anxiety, frustration, a sinking sense of ruin. It is the emotional weight of believing our careful script has been irrevocably spoiled. We invest so much in the picture of how things should be, that when life adds its own color, we see only the ruin of our original idea. We suffer not just the event, but our fierce loyalty to the plan that preceded it. Buddhist philosophy offers a spiritual reframe of immense subtlety. It suggests that our pain is less about the event itself, and more about the silent contract we believe has been broken. The contract that says, if I am good, if I am careful, things will go according to my design. The reframe is this: the contract is not with a universe that obeys your will, but with a universe that invites your growth. The spilled ink is not a violation of terms. It is the introduction of a new element into the composition, asking for a more creative, more resilient response from the artist. Imagine your life is a piece of clay on a potter's wheel. You have an idea, a tall, elegant vase. You center the clay, you begin to pull up the walls. But the clay has its own nature. A slight imperfection in the material, a subtle shift in moisture, and the cylinder begins to wobble, to lean. The mind that is attached only to the vase sees this as failure. The hand that feels the clay, however, can have a different relationship. It can listen. It can follow the wobble, allowing the form to become something else. A graceful, asymmetrical bowl, perhaps, with a character the perfect vase could never possess. The reframe is to move from being a dictator of form to a collaborator with the material of the moment. This is where we turn to nature, our most patient instructor. Consider a tree growing on a windy cliffside. From birth, it is battered by constant, strong gusts from the sea. Does it grow straight and tall, like a tree in a sheltered forest? It cannot. If it tried, it would snap. Instead, it grows into the wind. Its trunk becomes thick and gnarled, its branches stream away from the prevailing breeze, creating a windswept, sculpted shape of incredible strength. The wind, which seems like an adversary, is actually the force that shapes its unique, resilient architecture. Without that constant pressure, it would be a weaker, more ordinary tree. The adversity is written into its very grain, making it unshakable. Your challenges are that wind. They are not an error in your location. They are the specific atmospheric condition of your soul's development. They are what give your character its distinctive grain, its unbreakable strength. The universe is not placing you in the wrong spot, it is placing you in the precise spot where you can grow into your most resilient shape. The empowering insight here is a quiet revolution. Your struggles are not evidence that you are off course. They are the very terrain of your intended course. The difficulty is the curriculum. The wind is the teacher. And you are not a sapling waiting for calm weather. You are a cliffside tree, being forged into something that can withstand any storm, becoming beautiful in a way that calm conditions could never produce. If this perspective, this first step from seeing ruin to seeing raw material, feels like a door opening within you, you are welcome to stay here with us. Consider subscribing to Monk's Temple, where we explore these quiet revolutions together, learning to paint with the spilled ink. Let's breathe into that space, the space where the spilled ink is still wet, where the wind is still blowing. That feeling of being mid-conversation with an event you didn't choose. It's here, in this raw and tender space, that we so often feel a pull to assign blame. To find the cause out there. The clumsy apprentice. The faulty heater. The unjust boss. The unfaithful friend. It's a natural reflex, a way to make sense of the senseless by drawing a map with a clear villain and a clear victim. We place ourselves on the map, and the ache momentarily makes a kind of bitter sense. But what if the most important map isn't of external cause and effect, but of internal resonance? This brings us to a cornerstone of understanding, often simplified but profoundly beautiful in its depth, the principle of karma. In the West, we've shrunk it to a cosmic tit-for-tat, a moralistic scoreboard. In the deep waters of Buddhist wisdom, karma is far more intimate. It is the law of vibrational echo. It is the universe's way of saying, I hear you. And this is how your signal sounds when it returns to you. Think of your mind as a vast, silent mountain lake. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take, is like dropping a stone into that water. The stone's size, its shape, the intention with which you throw it, all of this creates a specific set of ripples. Those ripples travel outward, touch the far shores of your experience, and then return. They come back as the quality of your relationships, the opportunities that land at your feet, the general atmosphere of your days. If you throw stones of resentment, the water that laps back at you is choppy and cold. If you place stones of generosity gently on the surface, the returning waves are gentle, smoothing the sand at your feet. Your outer world is not a random painting, it is a reflection of the inner landscape you are actively cultivating. This is not about blame. It is about profound empowerment and equally profound responsibility. It means the most powerful place to affect change in your life is not in frantically trying to calm the reflected waves on the shore, but in becoming mindful of the stones you are choosing to throw into your own lake. Here's an original story, set in a place we all know, a busy office. David saw his workplace as a jungle. Colleagues were competitors to be outmaneuvered. His boss was a gatekeeper to be appeased. Every email was a potential threat, every meeting a skirmish. He walked through his days armored in suspicion, and his world dutifully reflected this back. Alliances formed around him, excluding him. Feedback felt like criticism. His projects were indeed fraught with political obstacles. His lake was perpetually turbulent with the stones of distrust he threw each day. Then, a small thing happened. The woman at the front desk, whom he passed every morning with a curt nod, was sniffling, clearly fighting a cold. Almost without thinking, on his coffee run, David brought back an extra tea for her. Her surprised, grateful smile was a tiny, warm sunbreak in his fog. It felt different. The next day, he tried an experiment. In a meeting, instead of immediately shooting down a colleague's half-formed idea, he said, "That's an interesting starting point. What if we explored that angle?" The colleague's defensive posture melted into collaboration. The stone of slight encouragement created a ripple of openness. David didn't transform the company. He began, stone by stone, to change the quality of his own inner actions. Slowly, the reflection began to shift. The jungle didn't disappear, but paths began to clear. People responded to his new frequency. The karmic loop of isolation and struggle began to unwind, not because the world changed first, but because the signal he was sending out changed its tune. This mirrors the emotional weight we carry when we feel like perpetual victims of circumstance. A weight of powerlessness, of bitterness. The spiritual reframe that karma offers is this: you are not a passive cork bobbing on the ocean of chance. You are an active participant in a constant, energetic dialogue. You have agency in every moment over the quality of the stone in your hand. Let's use a nature metaphor to deepen this. Imagine a single note sung into a deep, complex cave. The cave doesn't judge the note. It simply responds with its own echo, shaped by every contour of its walls. Sing a note of fear, and the echo that returns is long, distorted, and haunting. Sing a note of clarity, and the echo is clean, resonant, and true. Your being is that cave. Your life experiences are the returning echo, showing you the current shape of your own interior. If you don't like the echo, the work is not to shout at the cave walls. The work is to change the note you are singing. The empowering insight is one of immense creative power. You are, in every moment, composing the echo of your tomorrow. The circumstances you find yourself in today are the returning music of the notes you have sung before. And in this present moment, you are free to choose a new note. This is the heart of the teaching on karma. It turns fate into dialogue. It turns victimhood into artistry. But to engage in this artistry, we must understand the nature of the material we are working with. The clay on the wheel. The water in the lake. This leads us to perhaps the most fundamental, and most liberating, of all the truths whispered by the Buddha, the truth of impermanence, Anicca. To understand the echo, we must understand the cave. To understand the reflection, we must understand the nature of the water. And so we come to the quiet, constant truth that underlies everything, the principle of impermanence, Anicca. Everything is in motion. Everything is passing. This is not a philosophical idea. It is the breath of existence itself. Feel your own heartbeat, the systole and diastole, a constant rhythm of coming and going. Watch a cloud form, drift, and dissolve against the blue. See the green shoot push through the soil, become a stalk, a flower, and then return to the earth. Your body is not the same collection of atoms it was a year ago. Your thoughts are a stream, never freezing into a single, permanent picture. The feeling of joy that lifted you this morning has already subtly shifted its shape. The grief that felt like a permanent resident last year has, even if just a little, changed its weight and texture. We know this. Intellectually, we nod. But in our hearts, we build fortresses against it. We want the joy to solidify. We want the loved one to stay unchanged. We want our health, our success, our comfort to become permanent fixtures in the gallery of our lives. And when they don't, when the joy fades, the loved one leaves or passes, the health falters, we feel betrayed. We cry out against the fundamental nature of reality itself. This resistance, this fierce and futile clinging to the riverbank while the current pulls at our legs, is a primary source of our suffering. But what if impermanence is not the universe's flaw, but its most profound and necessary grace? What if it is the very mechanism of healing, of possibility, of life itself? Imagine you are a composer, but you are forced to write your symphony on a scroll that can never be altered. The first movement is magnificent. But as you evolve, you hear new themes, richer harmonies. The old score feels limiting, even embarrassing. Yet it is permanent. You are trapped forever in the composition of your past self. Impermanence is the compassionate hand that provides a fresh sheet of paper every single moment. Yes, it takes away the finished masterpiece. But it also takes away the regrettable mistake, the clumsy phrase, the dead-end theme. It grants you the freedom to begin again. It is the condition for creativity, for learning, for growth. The emotional weight here is the deep, often unnameable anxiety of loss. It's the background hum of knowing that everything we love is transient. It's the fear that lives in the shadow of every embrace, every achievement. We try to soothe it by acquiring more, by holding tighter, by building higher walls. But the river of time flows through every wall. The spiritual reframe offered by the Buddha is radical acceptance. Not a gloomy resignation, but a clear-eyed, courageous agreement with what is. It is the understanding that to fight impermanence is to fight the very force that allows for new beginnings. It is like a tree in autumn, clenching its leaves, refusing to let them go, and in doing so, starving its own roots and preventing the possibility of spring buds. The tree's wisdom is in the glorious release. The vibrant reds and golds are its celebration of the cycle, not a protest against it. Here is a story of a family heirloom. A woman inherited a beautiful, delicate vase from her grandmother. It represented love, continuity, memory. She kept it in a place of honor, dusting it with care, warning children away. One day, while cleaning, her sleeve caught the edge. It fell. The sound of it shattering was the sound of her heart breaking. A piece of her past, a tangible link to love, was now 100 fragments on the floor. She knelt, not to clean, but to weep. She wept for the vase, for her grandmother, for the impermanence of all things. After the storm of grief passed, a strange calm settled. She carefully gathered every shard. She couldn't bear to throw them away. So, she bought a clear, resin orb. Layer by layer, she placed the pieces inside, suspended in the clear substance. When it was done, she had a new object. Light would pass through it, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the wall. The vase was gone. But its essence, its shape, its color, its history, was now captured in a new form, one that interacted with light in a way the whole vase never could. The impermanence of its form led to the creation of something that celebrated its memory through transformation, not through static preservation. This is the nature metaphor, the forest floor. Walk through an old forest. The ground is soft, fertile, rich with life. What makes it so? It is the continuous, gentle rain of dying. Leaves fall, branches drop, giant trees eventually return to the earth. This constant passing away is what creates the nutrient-dense humus from which new life springs. Without death, there is no soil. Without the end of one form, there is no beginning of another. The decaying log is not a tragedy, it is a nursery for moss, fungi, insects, and saplings. Your endings, your losses, your released dreams are this fertile decay. They feel like barren death, but they are preparing the soil for what is meant to grow next. The universe is a master gardener, composting the old to feed the new. The empowering insight is one of profound trust. Letting go is not loss. It is making space. The clearing of the canvas is not an emptiness to be feared, but a freedom to be cherished. When you stop fighting the current and learn to float, you discover the river is carrying you somewhere. Your task is not to stop the flow, but to learn to swim with grace, to appreciate the changing scenery. The beauty of the blossom is inseparable from the fact that it will wilt. Knowing this doesn't ruin the blossom, it makes the moment of its blooming achingly, preciously sweet. This is the gift of impermanence. It teaches us how to truly love what is here, now, because we know it is a fleeting visitation. Yet, why is it so hard to open our hands and let the leaves fall? Why do we clench? This clinging has a name, and it is the very root of the suffering we feel when impermanence does its work. That clenching. The white-knuckled grip on the leaf, the relationship, the version of ourselves we recognize. We've felt it in our bodies, a tightness in the chest, a hardening in the belly. It is the instinctive recoil from the river's flow, the desperate anchoring against the wind. In the language of the Buddha, this is tanha, often translated as craving, thirst, or attachment. It is the mental glue we apply to people, outcomes, possessions, and states of mind. It is the silent, persistent whisper, this must stay. That must not happen. I am this, and I cannot be otherwise. Attachment is not love. Love is open-handed. Attachment is a closed fist. Love says, I cherish your presence. Attachment says, I cannot be without your presence. Love is a connection that liberates. Attachment is a chain that binds both the holder and the held. Our deepest suffering blooms in the gap between the reality we have and the reality we are attached to having. Consider the quiet agony of a sleepless night, replaying a conversation, attached to the idea that you should have said something different. Or the heavy sorrow after a dream job slips away, attached to the identity of being that successful person. The event passes, but we remain, stuck in the glue of our own unmet conditions for happiness. The emotional weight is the feeling of being trapped in a story that hurts, unable to turn the page because we are clinging so tightly to the sentence we wish we could rewrite. The spiritual reframe here is one of gentle, surgical precision. It asks, what are you holding on to that is holding on to you? What story about how life should be is causing you to argue with how life is? Attachment is the root of the noise, the static that distorts the clear signal of the present moment. Letting go isn't about not caring. It's about caring so deeply for your own peace that you are willing to unclench the hand, to feel the terrifying and liberating openness of the palm. Imagine you are holding a small, live bird in your cupped hands. If you clutch it tightly, out of fear it will fly away, you will harm it. You will feel its fragile struggle, its panic, and your own hand will ache with the strain of control. If you open your hands completely, it may indeed fly away. But in that open, gentle cup, there is also the possibility it will choose to stay, to rest lightly in your trust. And if it flies, your hands are free. Free to feel the air, to touch another thing, to be at peace. Attachment is the clutch. Love and acceptance are the open cup. Here is a story about a master carpenter and his apprentice. The master was building a temple gate, a magnificent torii of intricate joinery. The apprentice was tasked with preparing a key beam, sanding it to a perfect, silken smoothness. He worked for days, his identity becoming entwined with the perfection of this single beam. When it was finished, he presented it with pride. The master examined it, nodded, and then did the unthinkable. He took a hammer and chisel and deliberately cut a deep, intentional notch into the center of the flawless wood. The apprentice cried out in anguish. Why? It was perfect. The master pointed to the grand design. This beam must join with another. The perfection you created was a closed circle. It connected to nothing. This notch, he said, touching the flaw, is called a kigoroshi. The tree-killing joint. It is where the other beam will lock into it. The strength of the gate will come from this interlocking imperfection. Your beautiful surface was sterile. This notch makes it capable of relationship, of creating something greater than itself. The apprentice's attachment to the beam's isolated perfection was shattered, and in its place, he understood a deeper principle: true strength lies in connection, not in flawless isolation. Our attachments are often to our own isolated perfections, our self-image, our plans, that cannot connect to the greater, unfolding design of life. Let's turn to nature for our metaphor, the mangrove tree. Mangroves thrive in the turbulent, shifting zone where salt water meets fresh water, where land is barely land. To survive the constant tides and soft mud, they do not dig a single, deep, rigid taproot. Instead, they send out a web of prop roots from their trunks, a sprawling, adaptive network that grips the unstable ground by being flexible and interconnected. Attachment is like a single, deep taproot in shifting sand. It is doomed to be exposed and topple. The mangrove's wisdom is non-attachment to a single, fixed point of stability. It finds its stability in a fluid, responsive embrace of the changing environment. Its strength is in its ability to hold on lightly to many points, to sway and give, and thus to stand firm where a rigid tree would fall. The empowering insight is this: your suffering is not a sign that you need to hold on tighter. It is a sign that you are holding on to something that life is asking you to release. The notch in your perfect beam feels like ruin, but it is the very thing that will allow you to connect to a larger purpose. The open hand feels vulnerable, but it is the only posture that can truly receive. When you feel that clenching, that familiar ache of resistance, you can pause. You can breathe into the fist. And you can experiment, finger by finger, with the miracle of letting go. You are not abandoning what you love. You are ceasing to strangle it with the conditions of your own need. This act of releasing, of opening the hand, has a name. It is the gateway to peace. It is called acceptance. Acceptance. The word is often misunderstood. It is mistaken for passivity, for surrender in the face of injustice, for a kind of spiritual bypass where we paste a smile over a wound and call it healed. True acceptance, as taught in the heart of Buddhist practice, is none of these things. It is the most active, courageous, and clear-eyed state imaginable. It is the deliberate turning toward reality, without the filter of your wishes, to see it exactly as it is. It is saying, this is the current weather in my life. It is raining. Not, it shouldn't be raining. Not, if only it were sunny. Just, it is raining. The emotional weight that acceptance alleviates is the exhausting burden of denial and resistance. It is the weight of the internal civil war. One part of you knows the truth, the relationship is over, the illness is present, the failure has occurred. Another part of you spends vast amounts of energy constructing an alternate reality, arguing with facts, weaving stories of blame, living in the ghost town of what should have been. This war creates a secondary layer of suffering, a suffering about the suffering. It is here, in this battlefield, that acceptance plants its flag of peace. Acceptance is the moment you stop swimming against the current, turn onto your back, and float. You are still in the river. The current is still taking you. But you are no longer exhausting yourself in a futile struggle. You are conserving your energy. You are able to look at the sky, to notice the banks passing by. From this place of rested awareness, you can then begin to swim with purpose, with the current, toward a shore you can actually reach. Here is a story. A young violinist developed a tremor in her left hand. It was slight, but for a musician who relied on pinpoint finger placement, it was catastrophic. Her dream of a solo career seemed to evaporate. She fought it. She practiced through fatigue and frustration, she sought specialist after specialist, she raged against the unfairness. The tremor, fed by her tension and fear, worsened. She fell into a despair so deep she could not touch her instrument for months. One afternoon, in the silence of her apartment, she heard a street musician outside playing a simple, haunting folk melody on a fiddle. It was full of slides and vibrato, emotion poured out through imperfection. Something broke open inside her. She took out her violin. For the first time, she did not try to play despite the tremor. She let her hand shake. She placed her fingers on the strings and let the tremor become a part of the sound, a wide, aching vibrato, a slide between notes. She wasn't playing the technically perfect concerto of her dreams. She was playing the raw, trembling truth of her own body. And in that sound, there was a beauty so profound it brought tears to her own eyes. She had accepted the tremor. In doing so, she stopped fighting herself. She discovered a new voice within her instrument, one that was uniquely, powerfully hers. The obstacle became her signature. This is the nature metaphor, the bamboo in the snow. In a heavy winter storm, the mighty oak, with its rigid branches, may snap under the weight of the accumulating snow. The bamboo, however, has a different strategy. It bends. It yields to the weight. Its stalk arcs low to the ground, letting the snow slide off. When the storm passes, it swings back upright, resilient and unbroken. Acceptance is this bending. It is not breaking. It is the intelligent, flexible yielding to a force you cannot control, so that you remain whole, ready to rise again when conditions change. The oak's resistance is its downfall. The bamboo's acceptance is its salvation. The empowering insight is that acceptance is the foundation for any meaningful action. You cannot build a stable house on the quicksand of denial. You cannot navigate from a place you refuse to acknowledge on the map. Acceptance is the solid ground of what is. From here, and only from here, can you ask the powerful question, now that this is true, what is the most wise and compassionate response? Acceptance doesn't mean you approve of the illness, but it means you can now wisely seek treatment without the added panic of rage. It doesn't mean you condone the injustice, but it means you can now channel your energy into effective change rather than impotent fury. It ends the war with reality so you can engage with it skillfully. But how do we cultivate this ability to bend, to float, to see clearly? How do we step out of the whirlwind of our thoughts about the storm and simply be in the weather of the present moment? This requires a specific quality of attention. It requires a gentle training of the mind. It requires the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness. Sati. It is a word that has traveled far from its roots, often landing in our modern world as a tool for productivity or stress reduction. But at its essence, in the deep soil of Buddhist practice, mindfulness is something far more radical. It is the art of coming home. It is the gentle, continuous return of your attention from the crowded marketplace of past and future, to the quiet, luminous room of the present moment. Most of our suffering is not here, in the now. It is in the mental reruns of yesterday's slights and the pre-living of tomorrow's fears. We are haunted by ghosts and terrified by phantoms, all while life, real and immediate, unfolds unnoticed right before us. The emotional weight that mindfulness alleviates is the diffuse anxiety of being lost in thought, the feeling of being mentally elsewhere. It's the unsettled sense that you are missing your own life. You eat but don't taste. You listen but don't hear. You look but don't see. You are present in body, but your mind is a time traveler, and it is perpetually tired from the journey. The spiritual reframe is breathtakingly simple: you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that knows the thoughts. Thoughts are weather patterns in the sky of your mind, clouds passing, storms brewing, clearings appearing. Mindfulness is the shift from identifying as the cloud, I am angry, to knowing yourself as the vast sky that contains the cloud, there is anger present. This shift changes everything. It creates a space between the event and your reaction. In that space lies your freedom. Imagine you are sitting by a clear, slow-moving stream. Your thoughts and feelings are leaves floating on the surface. In an unmindful state, you see a leaf labeled worry, and you jump onto it. You are carried away by it, down the stream, lost in its story. Mindfulness is the practice of remaining on the bank. You see the leaf of worry float by. You acknowledge it. Ah, there is worry. But you do not jump on. You watch it come, and you watch it go. Another leaf, joy, floats past. You see it too, without clutching at it. You remain on the bank, the silent, compassionate witness to the ever-changing flow. Here is a story about a clockmaker. He lived in a small room filled with the relentless, overlapping ticks and tocks of 100 clocks. He could hear nothing else. His sleep was measured in ticks, his meals in tocks. He grew irritable, anxious, his own heart seeming to sync with the mechanical chaos. One day, a traveler left a broken clock for repair, a silent, still presence amidst the noise. The clockmaker, in a moment of frustration with the din, placed his ear against the silent clock's wooden case. Inside, he didn't hear nothing. He heard a deep, resonant, almost imperceptible hum, the sound of the wood itself, the quiet echo of the room. It was peace. He realized he had been listening to all the surfaces of the noise, but never to the substance of the silence that held it. He began to practice. He would pause his work, close his eyes, and listen not to the ticks, but through them, for that underlying hum of presence. Slowly, the clocks didn't get quieter. But his relationship to the sound changed. He was no longer trapped on the surface of the noise, he had found the still point within it. The cacophony became a symphony playing against a backdrop of deep, unshakable silence. Mindfulness is finding that hum beneath the ticks and tocks of your thinking mind. Let's use a nature metaphor, the pond at dawn. At night, wind stirs the water, obscuring the bottom. At dawn, the wind often settles. As the surface becomes still, it transforms into a perfect mirror, reflecting the sky above. But if you look through the surface, the stillness also allows you to see clearly into the depths. The stones, the plants, the life below. Your mind is that pond. Your churning thoughts are the wind on the surface. Mindfulness is the settling of the wind. It allows you to see the clear reflection of the present moment, the sky, and also to see into the deeper truths of your own nature, the depths. The practice is simply to stop stirring the water. To sit. To breathe. To allow the silt of mental activity to settle on its own. Clarity is not something you create. It is what remains when you cease creating turbulence. The empowering insight is that mindfulness is not about achieving a special state. It is about recognizing the sacredness of the ordinary state you are already in. The feeling of the breath entering your nostrils. The weight of your body on the chair. The play of light on the wall. This is it. This is the texture of your life. When you pay attention to it, without layering a story of liking or disliking onto it, you step out of the drama of your personal narrative and into the direct, vibrant experience of being alive. You discover that within you is a capacity for peaceful, open awareness that is untouched by the passing content of your life. You find the sky that never storms, the bank that is never swept away, the hum beneath all noise. From this place of clear, settled awareness, a natural wisdom begins to arise. You start to see patterns. You notice how a thought of lack leads to a feeling of anxiety. You see how clinging to an outcome creates tension in the body. You observe the chain of cause and effect within your own mind. This seeing is the beginning of wisdom. And it reveals that your mind is not a fixed, solid thing. It is malleable. It can be trained. It can be transformed. This is the greatest hope of all. The realization that the mind can be transformed is the discovery of our greatest inner freedom. We are not sentenced to live forever within the same cramped rooms of our habitual thoughts and reactions. The mind, as illuminated in Buddhist psychology, is more like clay than stone, impressionable, responsive, capable of being reshaped by intention and practice. This is not a metaphor of gentle molding. It is the alchemy of consciousness. The intense pressures of life. The heat of loss, the friction of conflict, the weight of uncertainty, are not merely to be endured. They are the very kiln in which our awareness is fired, transforming raw experience into the ceramic vessel of wisdom. The emotional weight this principle alleviates is the despair of feeling stuck. The belief that, this is just how I am, or, my life will never change. It is the heaviness of a repetitive, painful story that feels like destiny. We confuse the familiar grooves of our neural pathways with the limits of our soul. The spiritual reframe is one of boundless possibility. Your past does not have to be the blueprint for your future. Your consciousness is an evolving process, not a fixed product. You are not a statue, carved and finished. You are a river, constantly carving its own new course through the landscape of your life. The events that happen to you are the topography, the rocks, the bends, the falls. But the water. Your awareness has the capacity to wear down the rock, to find a new way, to keep moving toward the ocean. Here is a story about a stained glass artist. She worked in a studio filled with brilliant colors, piecing together scenes of saints and angels for cathedrals. A fire swept through the studio one night. In the morning, all that remained were heaps of shattered, blackened glass, fused together in grotesque clumps by the intense heat. Her life's work was gone. For weeks, she saw only the ruin. One morning, the sun hit one of the fused clumps just so. She picked it up. The fire had transformed the glass. It was no longer transparent panes but opaque, swirling marbles of color, shot through with unexpected veins and bubbles. A wild idea came to her. She began collecting these clumps. She didn't try to recreate her old designs. Instead, she set these new, fire-born jewels into leads, creating abstract windows that looked not like stories, but like captured light from the heart of a star. These windows, born from destruction, became more sought after than her traditional work ever was. The fire did not destroy her art. It transformed both the medium and the artist. It forced a new language of beauty from the ashes. Her consciousness, faced with the fused clump, could have seen only loss. Instead, through a shift in perception, she participated in a transformation. The mind's malleability allowed her to co-create with the disaster. Let's find our metaphor in nature, the metamorphosis of the caterpillar. In its larval stage, the caterpillar has a certain identity, a certain way of moving through the world, consuming leaves. Then comes a time of profound crisis. It encases itself in a chrysalis. Inside, it does not simply grow wings. Its body literally dissolves into a nutrient-rich soup. From this complete breakdown of its old form, the imaginal cells, which were always present but dormant, begin to assemble an entirely new being, the butterfly. The caterpillar's old mind, its entire way of being, is not upgraded. It is dissolved and reorganized at the most fundamental level. Your times of greatest difficulty, when you feel like you are dissolving, are not evidence of your end. They are the necessary chrysalis stage. The old ways of thinking, the old identities, are breaking down to provide the raw material for a new consciousness to form. You are not falling apart. You are entering the soup from which wings will emerge. The empowering insight is that you are an active participant in your own metamorphosis. You have a choice in every moment, to see the fused clump as ruin or as a new medium. To experience the chrysalis as a tomb or as a womb. Transformation doesn't happen to you while you are passive. It happens through you when you engage with the process. It requires the courage to let the old form dissolve, trusting that the imaginal cells of your deeper wisdom know how to assemble what comes next. This understanding changes the very purpose of adversity. It is not meaningless punishment. It is the sacred curriculum of the soul. Each challenge is a specific lesson, calibrated with exquisite precision to the exact stage of your development. This is why no two people's paths look the same. The universe is not unfair, it is impeccably efficient, delivering exactly the experiences needed to catalyze the next stage of growth for each unique consciousness. This leads us to the heart of the matter, the hidden lessons embedded in the very fabric of our difficulties. Why do we so often find our greatest teachers in the guise of our greatest trials? If the mind is malleable clay, and life's pressures are the kiln, then the lessons are the master potter's hands. They shape with intention. Every adversity, every moment of friction, every heartbreak carries within it a specific, hidden curriculum for your soul. These are not random tests of fortitude. They are exquisitely tailored tutorials. The person learning patience will find themselves in endless lines and delayed dreams. The soul mastering forgiveness will be presented with repeated opportunities to feel slighted. The one cultivating courage will meet their dragons, time and again. The universe is not a chaotic schoolhouse, it is a master tutor with an infinite syllabus, and you are the only student in your unique class. The emotional weight this understanding lifts is the burden of cosmic resentment, the feeling that life is arbitrarily cruel, that you are being singled out for hardship. It is the story of, "Why me?" that echoes in an empty chamber. When we see our challenges as personalized lessons rather than random punishments, the narrative shifts from victimhood to apprenticeship. The spiritual reframe is one of profound dignity. You are not being picked on. You are being prepared. The difficulty is not a sign of your unworthiness, but of your potential. The master potter does not waste time on lifeless, unresponsive clay. The heat of the kiln is reserved for the piece deemed worthy of becoming a vessel. Your trials are the evidence that you are being fashioned for a purpose. Here is a story about a master navigator of the ancient Polynesian tradition. He was teaching his grandson the art of wayfinding. Sailing vast oceans without instruments, using only the stars, the waves, the flight of birds. For the first lessons, he did not take the boy to sea. He took him to a small, enclosed lagoon, its water still as glass. "Chart this," he said. The boy was confused. There were no stars by day, no swells to read. He saw nothing to navigate by. He sat for hours, frustrated, seeing only his own reflection. At dusk, his grandfather returned. "What did you learn?" The boy said, "I learned nothing. The water shows nothing." The old man pointed to the sky, now mirrored perfectly in the lagoon's surface. You wanted to read the ocean, but you first had to learn to be still enough to see the reflection of the heavens. You were not given a simple task. You were given the foundational task. Your frustration was the teacher. It burned away your expectation of grand journeys and forced you to master stillness. Now you are ready to see the smallest star reflected in the moving sea. The boy's failure in the lagoon was the precise, necessary lesson he needed before any true navigation could begin. His adversity was the curriculum. Let's turn to the natural world for our metaphor, the forest after a fire. At first glance, it is a landscape of devastation, blackened trunks, ash, silence. But this apparent death is a necessary part of the forest's life cycle. The fire clears the thick underbrush that chokes new growth. It releases nutrients locked in old wood back into the soil. Its heat is required for the cones of certain trees, like the lodgepole pine, to even open and release their seeds. The fire is a catastrophic teacher, but it teaches regeneration. It creates the conditions for a new, more diverse, and resilient forest to rise from the ash. The lesson of the fire is not about destruction, it is about the essential role of clearing for rebirth. Your personal fires. The ones that burn down the familiar structures of your life, are teaching you about resilience, about what truly matters, about the seeds of new life that require intense heat to germinate. The empowering insight is this: you can begin to dialogue with your difficulties. Instead of just asking, "Why is this happening?" you can ask, "What is this here to teach me? What quality is being summoned? What old undergrowth is being cleared away to make space for new growth?" This turns the adversary into the instructor. The pain becomes the text. You move from a stance of resistance to a stance of inquiry. This is not about glorifying suffering. It is about extracting meaning from it. It is the difference between being a prisoner of war and a student in a demanding but revered academy. The conditions might be similarly harsh, but the internal relationship to those conditions transforms the entire experience. One is endured. The other is engaged. This engaged, learning relationship with life requires one final, overarching understanding. It is the understanding that brings all the principles into a single, flowing harmony. It is the perception of interconnectedness, the insight that you are not a separate droplet fighting the ocean, but a temporary, unique expression of the ocean itself. This is the wisdom that turns knowledge into liberation. The final piece of understanding is not a principle to be learned, but a perspective to be remembered. It is the awareness of interconnectedness. From the vantage point of our individual lives, with their sharp pains and personal joys, we feel separate. We feel like islands, buffeted by private storms. But the deepest teachings of Buddhism point to a fundamental truth: there are no true islands. We are all peaks in the same mountain range, waves in the same ocean, distinct in form but inseparable in substance. Every action ripples through the whole. Every thought subtly alters the field. Your suffering and your joy are never yours alone, they are knots in the vast, living net of being. This perception dissolves the last vestiges of the lonely, isolated self. It alleviates the emotional weight of alienation. The feeling that you are going through this alone, that no one understands, that your burden is singularly heavy. When you glimpse interconnectedness, you realize you are being held by the same forces that shape the stars and the tides. Your personal story is a single thread in a magnificent, boundless tapestry. The spiritual reframe is one of radical belonging. You are not a stranger in a hostile universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself in a particular, temporary form. Your journey is not a solitary trek, but a note in a grand symphony. This does not diminish your individuality, it sanctifies it. Your unique pain, your unique joy, is how the whole feels and knows itself in this particular location, which is you. Here is a story, a simple one. A woman moved to a vast, bustling city. She felt utterly anonymous, a speck of dust in the chaos. Loneliness was her constant companion. One rainy evening, she slipped on a wet step and twisted her ankle. She sat on the curb, rain soaking her, pain radiating up her leg, feeling a wave of self-pity so complete it was almost theatrical. A stranger with an umbrella stopped. Then another, who had a first aid kit in her car. A shopkeeper brought out a chair. A taxi driver, seeing the small crowd, pulled over and offered to take her home for free. In 20 minutes, a network of care had materialized around her, woven from the threads of strangers. Her isolation was an illusion, broken by a moment of shared vulnerability. As she rode home, ankle throbbing but heart strangely full, she saw the city differently. It was no longer a cold machine, but a living organism, and her pain had been a nerve signal that prompted a healing response. Her suffering had not separated her, it had connected her. She had been given a direct experience of the net that holds us all. Let's find our metaphor in nature, the mycelial network. Beneath a forest floor lies a vast, intricate web of fungal threads called mycelium. It connects the roots of trees, even of different species, in a symbiotic network scientists call the Wood Wide Web. Through this network, trees share nutrients, send distress signals about pests, and support neighboring seedlings. A strong, old tree can nourish a struggling young one on the other side of the forest through these hidden threads. The trees appear separate, competing for sunlight. But underground, they are in constant, intelligent communion. Your life is like one of those trees. You may feel separate, striving on your own. But beneath the surface of visible events, you are connected to a vast, intelligent web of life. Support flows through it. Wisdom flows through it. Your healing contributes to the whole, and the whole contributes to your healing. Your obstacle might be a distress signal that mobilizes nutrients from elsewhere in the network, in forms you do not yet recognize. The empowering insight is that you are never alone in your transformation. The strength you need is not generated solely from within your personal reservoir, it is also drawn from the interconnected field of all being. When you practice acceptance, you allow the network to support you. When you release attachment, you stop blocking the flow. When you act with compassion, you become a conduit of that nourishing energy for others. Your personal growth is a gift to the collective, and the collective growth is the ground in which you are rooted. This brings us full circle, to the rain on the window from the very beginning. The rain that ruined your plans is also nourishing the hidden mycelial network. The event that feels like a personal interruption is a tuning of the entire web. Everything does happen for a reason, but the reason is not a petty, personal ledger. It is the harmonious, sometimes dissonant, movement of the whole towards greater awareness, complexity, and beauty. Your soul's curriculum is one strand in that grand movement. So, what is the practical result of holding all these principles, impermanence, karma, non-attachment, acceptance, mindfulness, malleability, and interconnectedness, in your heart? It is the cultivation of a specific quality of being. It is the development of unshakable peace that is not dependent on circumstance. It is the discovery of a resilience that is less like a wall and more like water, able to flow around, adapt to, and eventually shape the very rocks in its path. We have walked through the landscape of these principles, from the quiet truth of impermanence to the vast web of interconnection. We have sat with the potter and the spilled ink, with the carpenter and the notch, with the violinist and the tremor. We have learned to see the curriculum in the difficulty, the teacher in the storm. Now we arrive at the most practical question of all: how do you live this? Not as a philosophy to be admired, but as a reality to be embodied. The answer lies in the cultivation of a heart that is both serene and fierce, a mind that is both clear and vast. This is the fruit of the path. It is a quality of being we might call unobstructed flow. This is the state where you have made peace with the fundamental rules of the game. You know the clay is malleable, the kiln is hot, and the master potter's hands are your own conscious choices meeting the circumstances of life. You no longer waste energy arguing with the nature of reality. Instead, you use that energy to dance with it. The emotional weight that finally lifts is the chronic, low-grade stress of being at odds with existence. It is replaced by a profound sense of participation, of being in co-creation with life itself. The spiritual reframe becomes your default setting: life is not happening to you. It is happening for you, and through you, and as you. You are both the student and the lesson, the artist and the medium. Every moment is an invitation to practice letting go, to practice seeing clearly, to practice responding with wisdom rather than reacting from fear. Here is one final, original story. There was a renowned gardener who tended the grounds of an old temple. His specialty was the cultivation of peonies, and he could predict, to the very day, when each bush would erupt in its spectacular bloom. Pilgrims would travel to witness this event. One spring, a late, hard frost swept in just as the fat buds were about to open. The gardener's precious peonies were turned to blackened, wilted clumps. The pilgrims arrived to a scene of apparent devastation. The gardener was not in his shed, mourning. They found him on a far hillside of the temple grounds, a place normally wild and untended. He was on his knees, his face lit with wonder. The pilgrims followed his gaze. The frost had also kissed the hillside, but here, it had triggered a different response. Millions of tiny, resilient wildflowers, ones that usually bloomed modestly in the shade, had, in response to the shock of cold, burst forth in a dazzling, thick carpet of blue and gold, a sight no one had ever recorded. The gardener turned to the crowd, his eyes bright. "I spent my life learning to command the bloom," he said. "Today, I learned to witness the surprise. The peonies had one beauty to teach. The frost had another, far wilder one. I was attached to being the master of the first. Now I am a student of the second." He did not lose his love for peonies. But he gained the eyes to see that the intelligence of life has more than one language of beauty. His expertise was not destroyed, it was humbled and expanded. He found his unobstructed flow not in the perfect bloom he controlled, but in the joyful witness to the unexpected bloom he did not. Let's take our final metaphor from nature, the estuary. This is where the river of your personal journey meets the vast ocean of interconnected life. In an estuary, fresh water and salt water mingle. The boundaries are blurred. The environment is rich, nutrient-dense, teeming with life that can exist nowhere else. It is a place of constant change, of tidal flows, of profound fertility. To live with unobstructed flow is to become like an estuary. You allow the fresh waters of your personal experience, your joys, your sorrows, your lessons, to flow freely into the salt waters of the universal. You don't dam your river for fear of losing its identity. You let it merge, trusting that in the mingling, a richer, more life-giving consciousness is born. You become a place where the unique and the universal meet, creating an ecosystem of wisdom within yourself. The empowering insight, the culmination of all we have explored, is this: you are here to become an estuary. Your purpose is not to build a fortress of perfect, permanent peace on the riverbank. Your purpose is to learn the currents so well that you can navigate them with grace, and ultimately, to merge your unique waters with the great sea with trust and wonder. The storms, the rocks, the droughts, they all serve this end. They teach you the nature of water. They deepen your channel. They prepare you for the merging. So, the next time you meet an obstacle, feel the familiar clench of resistance. Pause. Breathe. Remember the potter's crimson blossom. Remember the carpenter's notch. Remember the violinist's tremolo. Ask the gentle, powerful questions. What stone am I throwing into my lake? What is this event asking me to release? Can I see the lesson in this curriculum? Can I find the stillness beneath the noise of my fear? You will not always find the answer immediately. But in the asking, you have already turned toward the flow. You have already begun to change your relationship with life from one of conflict to one of conversation. This path is a gentle, lifelong homecoming. It does not promise a life without rain. It promises you will learn the secret joy of dancing in it, head up, arms open, feeling every drop as part of the great, nourishing whole. It does not promise you will never feel pain. It promises you will discover a peace that is deeper than pain, a stillness that holds all movement, a love that includes all loss. This is the understanding that has been kept warm for centuries in the quiet spaces of temples and the courageous hearts of practitioners. This is the gift. Not that everything happens for a good reason, but that everything happens for a meaningful reason, woven into the boundless, intelligent, evolving tapestry of existence. And you, in all your glorious, struggling, perfect imperfection, are an essential thread in that weaving. Thank you for walking this path with me today. If this journey has resonated with you, if you feel a call to continue exploring this way of being, you are always welcome here. You are always welcome at Monk's Temple. May you carry this sense of unobstructed flow into every moment of your beautiful, unfolding life.